2014, question 1, with a graphing calculator. For part A, the very first thing is the word average shows up. Always be careful of the word average. I want to point out that the word average also shows up in part C, and that the formula is essentially the same. But average rate of change of A means you're doing the slope formula because you know the function A. With your slope formula, then you're doing A of 30 minus A of 0 over 30 minus 0. Know that there are a variety of ways with your calculator that you can get the values of A. And I've told you about one way where you look at the graph. Let me, hold on, take that off. So you look at the graph and you can use your trace button and then push the number 30 and get a number. But you're not going to be able to store that number, and you're going to have to sit there and type the whole darn thing out. Another way that you can find it, but when I tried to see if I could store it, I couldn't. But know that if you're looking at your graph, you can push second F4, and value is the first thing that pops up. And if you push enter on that, and then write in x equals 30, push enter, it will give you the actual y coordinate for that x coordinate. But I was finding that my calculator wouldn't store that from there. So if you want your calculator to store these numbers, let me show you what you can do. Go to your home screen. If you do second quit, which is second and then the mode button side by side, you go to your home screen. In your home screen, you can ask it to find the y value of any function by first push your vars, move right to y vars, push enter on function, and if the function is your y1, push enter on y1. Then, if you want to know what is the y value for a particular x, start a parentheses, put the number 30, end parentheses, push enter, and it just gave you your value. You are able to store that number at this point if you want to. But what's going to be even faster for you than that is you could actually put in this entire expression in your calculator. So you could do parentheses and then go to your vars, y vars, enter, put in 30, end the parentheses, and then minus, and then do it again with vars, y vars, get the y1 out there, but put a parentheses with a 0. So I'm going to do that, vars, y1, parentheses of 0, end parentheses. Now I've got a parentheses also around my subtraction of those two y values. I need to divide that by 30. So this is the quickest way that you're going to evaluate this expression using a calculator. I'm going to push enter and voila, there it is. On the AP exam, they need you to write, come on, pen, work for me. They need you to express the formula you are using. Since A is defined already, and you have a calculator, that expression and then writing the numerical answer that your calculator gives you is sufficient. Just make sure you have at least 3 digits after the decimal point. You're allowed to round the 3rd digit up if you so desire. Yes. Yes. And thank you for double checking. Yeah, I moved all the stuff that said I was recording to my other screen so it wouldn't be in the way. But that is very important. Also, as you're working with part A, you want to make sure you read everything. In fact, I would say that when you do the first read, before you go about this expression, you may want to underline indicate units of measure so that you don't fail to do that. It's easy points. You don't want to miss that. So then you want to look at the fact that this is a change in A over a change in time. A is measured in pounds, T is measured in days. So that is going to be days, or sorry, pounds per day. Moving on to part B, find the value of A prime of 15. Using correct units, interpret the meaning of the value in the context of the problem. So, your options with your calculator, you can go to your graph menu and find the slope as we have done in the past with doing second trace and for the F4 menu and then doing dy dx. But I want to also show you that you can do it from your home menu as well. In this case, it'd probably be faster from the graph menu. But if you do it from your home menu, first, second quit again with the second and then the mode button right next to it. Then the math button right here on the left, right under the alpha button. Push math, and you're going to see NDeriv. It's number 8. Push number 8. And if you have a newer calculator, you'll see much more clearly what you need to do. If you don't have a newer calculator, you have to know actually the order to type things in. And that's where it's probably just easier for you to use your graph. But if you look at what this is asking you to do, you're going to first type in your variable x. You're going to type in the function you're taking the derivative of, and then the number that you need to take the derivative at. I'm going to type those things in and then show you what that looks like. If you have an old-fashioned calculator, then when you see NDeriv, parentheses in your home menu, you're actually going to type your function first. And in this case, your function is in your y1, so vars y1, then comma right above your 7. Then you're going to tell it the variable you're differentiating with respect to, and then you're going to tell it the number that you want the derivative at, end parentheses. And notice for the newer versions, you are still typing those 3 things in. It's just much more clear where that is. So I'm going to type those in and show you. I typed in the x, I go to vars, y vars, function, y1, and then go over and put 15 for what x is equal to. And so you can see how it looks, and then push enter. And we've got an answer. But I want to say again, this particular problem would probably be faster to do using your graph menu. So a prime of 15 is equal to negative 0.16. And then you can either put 3 or you can round up to 4. It accepts either way. But now the big thing is using correct units, interpret the meaning of the value in the context of the problem. Anytime they want you to explain the meaning of a derivative, your first thing is figure out whether it's a positive answer or a negative answer for your derivative. If it's positive, you need to use the word increasing. If it's negative, you need to use the word decreasing. They actually expect that. Be careful, because when you say decreasing, you don't want to say decreasing at the negative number rate, because that counteracts each other, double negative thing. You want to say decreasing at a rate of 0.163. Then going back to what A is representing an amount of grass clippings in a bin, and its number of pounds. So the amount of grass in the bin is decreasing at 0.163 pounds per day. And you need to make sure to include the number of the derivative, but you also need to include the number 15 and add on to that it is at day 15 that is true for. I'm going to show you the answer. No, not that one. This one. And try to get there. There we go. So you can see how they wrote the interpretation. And now I'm going to move on to part C. Part C, find the time t when the amount of grass clippings in the bin is equal to the average amount of grass clippings in the bin over the interval 0 to 30. That feels like a big mouthful. And it's going to take time to break it down and figure out what in the world it is saying. So the word average showed up again, and I want to point that out. And it's saying find the time for which the amount of grass clippings in the bin is equal to. I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to say amount of grass clippings in the bin is the function a of t. And then is equal to, I've got my equal to bar. Then it says the average amount of grass clippings in the bin over the interval 0 to 30. When the word average shows up, it's either you're doing average based on a slope formula or average based on integrate the function and divide by the length of its interval. If you have the function that you want the average value of, you're going to go the integration direction. It wants average amount of grass clippings. You have amount of grass clippings. So you will integrate that function from time 0 to time 30 and divide by the length of the interval. You're going to go to your calculator and find that number. And let me recommend to you that you're going to want to save this number so that your final answer is as accurate as possible. So I would say go to your home menu. In your home menu, type 1 divided by 30 and then multiply that by. If you push math 9, you'll get your integral, and then put all these stuff in for that integral. So it is from 0 to 30. The function is my y1, so I'm going to go vars, y vars, enter on function, enter on y1, and then dx. So I'm going to push enter on that, and I want to store this number. I'm going to go ahead and store it under the letter, I'm going to put it under letter B. I don't want to use A because that's too much like the function's name. So I push the store button right above your on, and then alpha whatever letter you choose. So I put alpha B, push enter, and make sure that what it gives you is the number you intended to store. Now, here's what you're going to do. You do need to express A of t equals this. You need to write that as an equation. You need to put down the number that you just got. And one way you can solve equations is to solve it through the graph. If you go to your y equals button and you already have A in your y1, you just need to put this number into your y2. But if you saved it, you don't have to retype it, because retyping the number opens you up to possibly typing a wrong number while you're typing it, and you're writing a rounded number to get to another answer, which you want to avoid. So I'm going to, right there on Y2, push alpha, and I saved it under the letter B, so alpha B. And it doesn't tell me what B is, but I make sure it is when I look at the graph. And now I'm going to push graph. The intersection of those two, you want the x coordinate because that is the answer to that equation. So to find the intersection, you're going to go to your F4 button with the second. So second F4, second trace. Intersect is number 5. And if these are the only two functions graphed, just push enter 3 times. First curve, enter. Second curve, enter. Guess, enter. And then that x coordinate is the correct answer. And that is 12.414. Now, I'm just trying to check. So that's representing the time t for which the amount of grass clippings in the bin is equal to the average amount. So make sure you are clear that this is the equation you're solving and that the answer to t is then that number. Do you have to say days in your answer? If they don't ask you to indicate units of measure, you don't have to, but you can. I'm going to move on to part D. For part D, it's another mouthful. It says that for t greater than 30, L of t, the linear approximation 2a at t equals 30, is a better model for the amount of grass clippings remaining in the bin. They want you to use L of t. I'm going to stop there, and we're going to talk about L of t. You want to understand that when they use the phrase linear approximation, what they mean is tangent line. And often they will use a capital L for the linear approximation. What I would tell you to do is, for a moment, don't worry about the letter L. Just focus on, how do I make an equation of a line? And to make an equation of a line, it's always going to be y minus a known y coordinate equals slope times x minus that same point's known x coordinate. Now t is the input, so that's the x. I want the tangent line approximation at t equals 30. And I want it to be, excuse me, a linear approximation 2a. So it's a tangent line 2a at 30. that means that the y coordinate is a of 30 and the slope is a prime of 30. Know that the x is the input t, and the y is the L of t. So as I just take that equation of a line and rewrite it with the variables and letters that they intend me to use, this is where I'm at. To get an actual equation for L of t, I just add the a of 30 to the other side. Now I need to find a of 30, and so if you don't want to have to type these numbers over and over again, you can save them. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to choose to save a of 30 as my letter C. You don't want to write this on your actual AP exam, but you do want to somehow write to yourself on scratch paper that these are the letters you're using. I'm going to call this a prime of 30D. And then I'm going to write that L of t is C plus that D number times t minus 30. But on paper, I want to actually write the numbers for C and D, but I don't want to type them in my calculator. So from the home menu, I can do vars, go over to yvars, push enter on y1, and then I want to know the value at 30. So parentheses 30 end parentheses. So I have my y1 with a parentheses 30 end parentheses. I push enter. And then I'm going to save that in my letter C. So I'm going to push store alpha C, push enter, and make sure that that is the number that I have there. Then I'm going to find my D, also from this menu. So I can push from the home menu, math, number 8 is the derivative, and I want the derivative with respect to x of y1. So I'm going to do vars, yvars, function, y1, enter. And if you have an old-fashioned calculator, you're going to want y1, comma, x, comma, 30. And then I get that answer. I'm going to store that answer under the letter D. So I push store, alpha, and then D. I push enter, and I make sure that that's the number it's saved. Now on the AP exam, I'm going to write those numbers down. So I'm going to write L of t equals 0.78, and I'm going to round up to 3, plus, and then this other number was negative 0.05, and maybe I round up to 6. But in my calculator, I have the exact number. And then parentheses t minus 30. I'm going to highlight what I would say don't write this down on the actual AP exam, but you may want to put that down as a side note on scratch paper. So now let's look at what the rest of it asked me to do, because it first wanted me to find L of t, and now it wants me to use L of t to predict the time at which there will be 0.5 pounds of grass clippings remaining in the bin. Now the amount of grass clippings is the y value, not the x value. So that means it's the L of t, and I need to solve this equation for t. Know that on an AP test, once you have written the equation, you don't need to explain any algebra steps that you take. You can simply write the answer. And what I personally would do is I would just start typing stuff into my calculator. I see that I have 0.5, and I'm going to need to subtract from that 0.783, but that's my C, so I'm going to go minus C. But I want a parentheses around that, so I'm going back. I'm pushing insert. Second delete button is insert, so that I can make this one swoop in my calculator. So 0.5 minus my chosen C number. Then to continue isolating t, I'm going to next divide by negative 0.056. So I am dividing by, and what I'm actually dividing by is just plain the number d. And I have to find my d. There we go. And then at that point, that number is equal to t minus 30. So to isolate t, my last thing is to add 30 to that number. And honestly, it's probably easiest to do putting in the calculator if you have written down on scratch paper what you have chosen for letters in your, yeah. And then you can just sit there and write 0.5 equals C plus D times T minus 30. And if you need to go step by step on the algebra, you can. And, then add the 30 and boom. And by doing this, you have the most accurate answer you can get. And your answer has to be accurate to 3 digits after the decimal point. So the T that I'm getting is 35.054. And now I'm going to go back and look at making sure that I answered the question. It said use L of t to predict the time at which there will be 0.5 pounds of grass clippings remaining in the bin. Show the work that leads to your answer. So that's my answer. It didn't tell me I had to use units. If you feel like you want to use units, you can, but you don't have to. And this one is using t in terms of, I'm trying to find where it says what t is in terms of. I think I have to go up further. T is measured in days. Okay. And then just to reiterate, you do not have to say days in your answer because it did not ask you to include units in your answer. But I've got to say, I think it's good form when you're doing a application type of problem. I think it's good form to put units in. But know that they can't mark you down if they didn't specifically prompt you for it. All right, I'm going to